So with many of our label applicators, whether that is a pouch labeler or a bottle labeler, we integrate the stainless steel sensor, an OGH500. That sensor works on the principle of telling it what to see and then telling it what not to see. And it is a very reliable sensor, works great, but I just get often calls that it's not reliable, that it's not, the label isn't applying correctly, or that in the case of a conveyor like this, the machine just spits out labels, which of course is caused by this sensor. And now let me tell you why this is happening and why some people might have some issues with that. The reason for this very video at this time is because when I was setting up this very pouch to label this, the label on this very pouch, I noticed how I run the pouch through the machine on this side, and the label just, there's 3 labels now on top of each other, and it's a very accurate placement. But then I ran the same pouch the other way, and I noticed that the label now always wanders up by an inch. And I was, of course, at first a bit taken away, but then I just had to make some adjustments. So let's quickly talk about that. Why did this happen? Well, if you look at a pouch like that, and it, for example, has the corner bent up like this, now you run the pouch like that, which means the sensor that sees the pouch on the edge will now, of course, trigger somewhat later, causing the label to be farther in the rear, farther to the rear. And then you turn it around and the edge is straight. That will cause that label then, of course, to be placed on a different spot. Now, often I'm asking customers or users to angle this sensor in about a 45 or 30 degree angle. And I often have very good success with that. But in this very example, that was my biggest enemy. Now, as you can see, I have adjusted the sensor now, well, almost vertical with a tiny, maybe 5 degree angle. Because totally vertically, so sensors don't behave that well. So now, playing with the angle of sensing, whether it's like 45 or whether it's almost vertical, is certainly something you want to do when you have problems sensing. But now here is another problem, what I'm often noticing. When you see here the seam of the belt, now the sensor is actually seeing that seam here. And if you now teach the sensor, let me grab a pouch, and now you're moving the pouch under the light like this, and now you teach the sensor, and then you take the pouch out and you push the rear button to tell it what not to see, then that will work just fine, and the sensor will go off and on with the pouch there or not. And now you're moving it. Now the seam comes by and the sensor now sees the seam, and you will notice the LED to come on again. So what you want to do in that instant is find that spot where the sensor LED comes on. You stop right on that spot. You can turn the conveyor by hand like this, back and forth. You stop it right on that spot where you see the LED come on, and you teach it right there on that spot. And you put the pouch under, push the forward button, and take the pouch off, and push the rear button. So now, just very quickly, one more time, what is the forward button and what is the rear button? I always call the forward button or the front button the button that is closer to the sensing end of the sensor, and the rear button, the button that is closer to the stem or the connection of the sensor. So front button, rear button. To teach the sensor, you put the product under this sensing light, push the front button, you take the, for 2 seconds, sorry, you need to push the front button by 2 seconds, take the pouch out, the LED will blink, now you push the rear button for 2 seconds, and now the LED should go off. If you push the rear button for 2 seconds and the LED blinks, your teaching process did not function correctly and you need to redo that. I do sometimes have to reteach the sensors 4, 5, 6 times, depending on the difficulty of the setup, depending on the difficulty of the color. And believe it or not, this blue was actually quite tricky to teach the sensor to see blue and not to see white. However, so I hope this video is of a bit of help for any troubles you may have with this sensor. Thank you.